Hello and welcome to Sensei podcast. This is Manos Brilakis discussing with leaders in the field of CTO and complex PCI. Sensei means teacher or master in Japanese. The goal of the Sensei podcast is to help you learn and improve in CTO and complex PCI so that you can become the best that you can be and offer your patients the best possible results. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sensei Podcast. It is my great pleasure to introduce our guest today, Dr. Katie Dawson from Providence Hospital in Portland, Oregon. Great CTO operator, great friend. And actually, I have to disclose to everyone that this is the second time I'm doing this because of my fault, I lost the initial footage. So I'm so sorry, Katie, for that. And welcome to the podcast again.
It's okay. It gives me a chance to reword all the things I feel like I could have said better. It's actually perfect.
Well, it was amazing to start with, but again, thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's a busy time for you with a new move to Portland and the new baby on the way. So, thank you for doing it today.
Of course.
Maybe we start from the beginning. How did you get into this line of work? How did you get into the complex intervention? It used to be an area not very friendly for women. How did you decide to get into this?
Yeah, I mean, I had the luck, I suppose, of going to the University of Washington for my general cardiology fellowship, which, as you know, has a very strong interventional program. And Bill Lombardi's there, Kate Carney's there, Jamie McCabe is there, and really found myself, and lots of others, the people I didn't leave out are also excellent. And just really enjoyed the cath lab. I think that hopefully this is becoming more common, but the University of Washington is a really unique place in that they didn't care who I was or my gender. They just cared that I was interested and, wanted to pursue this, and were very, very supportive. I think I first got the inkling that complex PCI would be something I would be interested in doing based on a few patients who we took care of during my general cardiology year who were quite literally told to go home on hospice for left main disease because they weren't candidates for bypass surgery. And I just found that so incredibly mind-blowing that I wanted to be able to offer people another option. Unfortunately, one of the things about medicine is that the first doctor you meet tends to be the person who decides what happens to you, unless you are educated enough to know to advocate for yourself or to look elsewhere for recommendations. And so I really wanted the skill set to be able to offer people another option if they were otherwise told that they didn't have it.
Perfect. And again, as you said, you train at a wonderful place with very experienced operators who are not afraid to tackle a super complex disease. Does that part of dealing with complexity and the potential of complications scare you, make you anxious, make you nervous?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's someone said this to me once. I can't quite recall who it was. It might have been Jamie or Bill, that if you're not a little bit afraid in these complex cases, you're like not paying attention, because obviously there's a reason why these cases get turned down. They're more complex, they're more high risk. So yeah, I think part of the process is knowing enough to be aware of the complications that can happen and treating that with respect, because people can look quite stable until the moment that they don't. So I think I do. I think we're all. I'm certainly a little bit nervous for all really complex cases, particularly if the person's very sick, if they're in the hospital, if they have disease that I know is going to be challenging, like their post-bypass surgery, it's heavily calcified, all those things. I think at least me personally, I'm always a little bit nervous. One of the things that I like about the field is that as a person, you sort of have to recognize that you are nervous about a case and then figure out ways to cope with it so that you can get the job done. And of course, we are all successful or unsuccessful to varying degrees with that challenge from case to case. I think there are certainly cases where I wish I had handled something better, or cases where I thought I handled something well. But it's the goal of trying to treat these cases with respect, be respectful of them, be fearful enough to know that things can go wrong, but then not so fearful that you can't make decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're actually right. It's the balance between, I mean, you have to, if you're not nervous, then you will probably get things not done the proper way. At the same time, if you're overly nervous, then you may create unnecessary complications. So that fine balance is what it all comes down to. What did you find the most difficult thing when you were training, doing these complex cases and in your first job in New York? What did you find the most challenging component?
Honestly, I think that the most challenging component is when things don't go the way you'd hoped. I mean, cases that go well and the patient feels great afterwards and their family is very grateful are the good parts of the job. You know, you want, the reason most of us do this is because we want to help people feel better and do better and be able to live their lives, but that just, because they're high risks, some cases don't go that way. And you know, we talk about that a lot, particularly in the high risk PCI fellowships, you know, that is a big piece of this job. But like with all things, being on your own and being the one solely responsible when things don't go well is really stressful. And I find that to be the hardest part. And I think some of that will get better over time, but I think some of it will always be there because the people that we're working on are human beings and who you want to go home to their families. So that, I think, for me, is the hardest part, is coping afterwards when things don't go the way I'd hoped, certainly.
And what do you do to cope? Obviously, it affects you and makes you sad and depressed. But how do you cope with this, and how do you bounce back to come back to the lab and do the next case?
Yeah, anyone who knows me knows that I am like very chatty. So if I have something, even if it's not something very serious like a death or a major perf or something like that, even if I have something that I just wish had gone better or that I had done better, everybody who is around me in the CTO space knows about the case because I gain a lot from talking through how things could have gone differently, like points where I made decisions that maybe I could have made a different one. So me personally, I cope by talking about the case. Probably too much to the chagrin of the people who have the misfortune of being on my CTO group texts. But truly, in a lot of ways, I find it to be very much like therapy, where my close friends who do this, we all sort of have a similar mentality where we're not trying to tell each other, you did nothing wrong, there's nothing you could have done better here. These were just sick patients. Some of that is true, but we try to give each other feedback about, like, here's where you could have made this decision differently. Not that you can change it now, but for the next case, I gain a lot from learning from things that don't go the way I want so that the next time, hopefully, they go better. Because I need complications to matter for the next person. Otherwise, it just seems like a terrible tragedy.
Absolutely. And that's sometimes hard. You know, some people have a complication and they don't want to talk to anyone. They feel kind of ashamed and worried what people say. Um, what would you say for those people? How can you make them open up and do exactly what you said, which is the best way to go, and it's therapeutic for the person, but also helpful for the next person?
Yeah, I mean, I know people like that. And my sense is that it stems from not having a supportive environment, either in training or an early career, where they were probably belittled or talked down to for every bad decision, or not bad decision, because no one willingly makes a bad decision, but everything that doesn't go right. And so for those people, I would say you need a better support group. Like, you need people who are actually supportive, not just critical. I think that is invaluable, particularly in our space, because of the high risk work that we do. Um, you need people who will support you, knowing that these cases are very hard and not just be critical. That sort of community, I think, is invaluable. So find that community, I guess. Don't keep talking to these people who are unhelpful. And
Absolutely. And that's a great point. But okay, you were privileged. You could train with people who are open to this kind of work and the idea, and they talk about it. But what for others who don't have that privilege, how do you find a group? Do you go to a meeting and start just talking to strangers? I mean, how do you develop this little group that you can feel comfortable and safe discussing these issues?
yeah, you're right. I think I have been very, very privileged in that, both where I train and because of the network that was inherent in my training environment, I naturally had these things like my CTO group text, if you will, is like myself, Jared Frizzell, Kate Carney, Rianne, Lindsay Celia, Brett Wanamaker, and Catherine Kunkel. And we all got to know each other because of complications course, and we like hung out. And of course, they're sort of all in the same generation and have the same general training background, though not all of us did dedicated CTO fellowships. Like Jared and Brett didn't. Um, but I think that some of it, yeah, is on us, on the people who want to start to learn how to do this sort of thing and get that sort of support group, is come to the meetings. And the smaller ones I think are really helpful, like complications and, because it's not a huge group like TCT and ACC, it tends to be more dedicated, like CTO Plus is a great example of this, of people who are there for this specific thing. And go talk to people. Most of us are pretty nice, I would say. But I recognize that it is really hard to go up to a stranger who maybe you just saw speaking on the podium to hundreds of people and say, hey, I'm interested in doing this. Do you have advice? Could I get your email or your cell phone number? But I think I know Bill will give his number out to anybody and just say, like, call me. It's a lot easier than people think, but recognizing that I think on the whole, we're probably a more introverted group. And so it's not easy for everybody, but definitely email, cell phones, we all just want to help.
Absolutely. I'll make sure I give your phone to everyone who asks, so no worries. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I might be hard to get a hold of in about 3 weeks.
But you're right. I mean, sometimes it's more the intimidation, and as you said, most people would definitely be open to talking and helping other people if they can. And we have all been through this, and we still go through this. And if you do complex or any PCI for that matter, you will go through that. So again, connection is one of the key skills, and if you're not good at it, then just overcome the shyness, I guess, and the awkwardness of the moment can really help. And at the same time, obviously, you take it seriously and you don't harass people overly, because that doesn't help either. How about the planning process and the way you do now? You've been in a different institution, you moved to a different institution. Have things changed at all since your training, or are you still doing them the same way?
I think planning is a lot the way I did it in fellowship, because especially being early career, having just a consistent way that I approach things every time is really helpful for me. I spend a lot of time looking at angiograms and a lot of time thinking about the upfront setup, because I think that one way that complex PCI can get even more complicated is if you're not ready for all the things that can happen. I sort of joked with my partners at my last job that the phrase, I think there's a microchannel, is maybe my least favorite phrase in CTO PCI, because it sort of implies that you need no other plan than like a gentle antegrade wire escalation strategy, and that's it. So I spend a lot of time thinking about, like, okay, when this doesn't work, what's the next step? If that doesn't work, what's the step after that? and where the points might be in the procedure where there might be a complication and how I would hope to get out of that. And certainly taking into account stable outpatients versus inpatients who are very sick. I think that that difference has become really more apparent to me as I've started doing these things on my own, like how much more fragile people who are already admitted to the hospital are. So, procedural planning and then talking to families about what to expect. I spend a lot of time doing that because I think it's really important.
Wonderful. And then, are there any cases you've done, good or bad, that have really taught you a lot?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I can sit here and say until I'm blue in the face that part of like procedural planning and complication management is remaining calm and like thinking through the algorithms of what could be going on. But very recently, I had a case where I had a complication. I sort of anchored on it being, it had to be this, and it, because I thought it had to be a perf, and it turns out it probably wasn't. And there were lots of other things that happened after that that were a result of me anchoring on it had to be a perf. And it was really, really humbling to me. Not because I think I'm generally a relatively humble person, but we spend so much time in complex PCI at CTO Plus and complications talking about like the decision spiral of you make one choice that probably wasn't the right one, and then it affects every choice you make after that. And even though I've gone to these conferences and talked about this and talked about it with peers and mentors, like all the time, I still failed. I still, was subject to the same failure points of thinking through a problem that we always talk about. And so it was good, I guess, in some ways, because it made it clear that like there are still things I need to work on, even though I obviously know that since I'm only like 2 years into my career. But it was, I wish things had gone a different way, but it was a good point for me to say, I really do need to work on these things. And like we're always talking about, that no one's perfect. And even if you know them kind of inherently.
Perfect. And I think that's the beauty of what we do, in that, you can never be perfect anyway. And, there's always room for improvement. I think everyone pretty much says the same. Now, when it comes to teaching other people, fellows, you'll be part of many courses. How do you decide if that person is a good candidate to learn, so to speak, if it's likely to learn or not, or you don't even think about that?
Yeah, I think, like we spoke about earlier, it takes so much guts to come up to a total stranger and ask how to get into a field and how to start doing more complex things. That if someone actually comes up and asks me about it who I don't know, I sort of automatically assume that clearly they're interested, clearly they had the strength to come up and do something like that. So I guess at conferences and stuff, if someone comes up and asks me about it, then I don't think twice about it. I think, great, glad you want to try to do more complex things. As I have come out of training, I then wonder about, okay, what's your environment like where at the job that you're at? Because not every environment wants you doing multi-vessel left main rota cases in an EF whose patient whose EF is 20. I want you to do that because I think those patients deserve an option and an intervention, but I want you to be supported in your environment. So I feel like I usually ask about that. And then if they have any means by which to have like proctoring or to go out to another institution, because unless your institution does that, then you need someone to teach you how to do it. So I don't think that answered the student question. I'm sorry.
No. This is perfect actually because these are key points for people who want to do this because you can get trained on it. I think you hit a great point. You can get trained to do anything you want, complex PCI, CTO, left main, etc. But if your hospital doesn't want you to do that, then it's a problem. So I guess if you're in a place that's not friendly to that, then you either plan to move afterwards to a place that is, or maybe that's not the better way to go because, like everything else, if you don't do it, it's less likely to be successful. So I think that's actually great points, and it's not just learning the tools, the techniques, how to prevent and treat complications. It's also being in an environment that first lets you do it, and also it's tolerant of complications because you will have complications with these complex cases. Now, Katie, congratulations on the baby. And that brings up a great point because many people are, many women are concerned. First of all, going into intervention because of the concerns of radiation, or even more so if they're pregnant and coming to the cath lab. So, how have you been handling that? And clearly, you do a great job. But what are your thoughts, and what should these women know?
Yeah, I mean, I think that first and foremost, I don't necessarily think as a woman who's interested in interventional cardiology that you have to be in an environment that has a lot of women, because I think there are lots of training programs, like UW in particular. When I was there, all of my mentors were men until they hired Kate. But I do think that there is value in having women in the field, both generally speaking, and so that women who are thinking about it can have someone to talk to about concerns like radiation exposure. From a practical standpoint, there is no data that if you wear appropriate lead protection in modern day cath labs, there's any risk to the fetus. My colleague, well, now my coworker and my former co-fellow, Logan Vincent, did a very nice kind of pilot study where she had a bunch of operators at the University of Washington wear basically fetal monitoring badges, and they were all basically zero across the board, including Bill's, who does like 3-hour CTOs. So I think that there's a lot of misinformation about what radiation safety in a modern day cath lab looks like. And I have witnessed physicians tell younger women who express concern about radiation exposure in the lab, say things like, yes, you really should be worried about that. It's a concern. And while I don't think that comes from a place of malintent. I don't think people are trying to be unhelpful, but it is deeply unhelpful at the end of the day because it's not factually accurate and inhibits women from wanting to pursue the specialty. Look, I am 9 months pregnant in the cath lab. It is not a walk in the park. My back hurts. My back hurts a lot. But that aside, the radiation aspect is really not the concern to me. And I think it's really important that sort of information gets out to trainees, because I think and know that it is a lot of the reason why some women don't pursue this field. So I basically take every opportunity I can to tell people that, because women are afraid, young women who are in a mostly male field like cardiology they're mostly not going to ask. So I just sort of say it out loud whenever given the opportunity, even if people don't ask directly.
And I think also it's as you say, the role model part, right? I mean, when we trained, there was no women in the cath lab. I think now, as we're seeing more and more women go into this area in the cath lab in general and in complex as well, then it's different because other women see that, hey, they did well, they had a baby, everything is fine. And I think that might help kind of alleviate some of those concerns and make people easier to work in the lab.
Yeah, I think it is always sort of easier to see yourself doing something when someone who looks like you is doing it. I think that's true of lots of minority situations and fields, at least in my opinion.
And one of the other reasons, and actually there's a lot of discussion about this right now, for women not going into the interventional complex is the work hours and the fear for discrimination, which I think has been improving. But what are your personal thoughts? Obviously, being in that area for a while now, what are your thoughts about the work hour load, and then the quote unquote discriminations? Will they respect me, and all these things that come along?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to downplay that there are certainly lots of hospitals and programs where it is very hard to be a female. Like I know they exist. I have been very lucky in that I have not had that issue. I've always been treated with respect where I have trained and worked. Um, so I hope that it is getting better, but I know that there are places where people or where women are still being treated that way. Um, my especially particularly in regards to salary, which I think is still, I mean, in fields, even fields other than interventional cardiology, it's a clear problem that's well demonstrated in the literature. Um, so I guess that is the one of the many reasons why having more women in the field will be extremely helpful, because the more you have a equal space in the or equal representation in the space, then the more common it is to be treated just like everybody else.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you are making a good job, great work on that, and being a role model for the women to come. And I must say, I do see them, the Sky meeting, CTO. I mean, all the meetings now. I think there's many more women who are going into this. So kudos to you, and the whole other group who are spearheading this. But
I know. I feel like I'm somewhat like I feel like the majority of my CTO friends are women.
there
So
you go. See.
I sort of remind myself that that's not common because, um,
Well, connecting, I think that helps. Connecting to people
yes,
maybe encourages them to, I don't know. But tell us a little bit more about how you keep in good shape. So obviously now you're 9 months. Congratulations again, as you say. It can be a little more difficult probably to move, and but how otherwise? How do you keep in balance and feeling good and energized and being able to do these complex cases?
yes. I was going to say, I'm like, I don't know if I'm exactly in great shape right now, but I well, first and foremost, I think being in the lab is really hard, even if you're not, like, for all of us, because of the requirement to wear lead. So I like side plug to all of the like non like wearable lead radiation shielding, like the zero G lead and things like the freestanding lead shielding, um, because I truly think that that is sort of the way things need to go in the future. It is a very simple, like a lead shield instead of us wearing lead is such a simple, low tech way to solve a problem and to improve the known orthopedic issues of our specialty. And I am currently wearing lead during pregnancy because of my own desires. But as soon as that's over, I can't wait to use our, like, we have Rampart, but there's lots of other companies that are coming on the market that are doing a similar thing. Because I really do think it helps you both with orthopedic issues of our specialty, but also with energy and the ability to then do things like exercise after work. Um, because I think after a whole day of wearing lead, you're tired. And taking that away, I think, does allow us to do more active things that allow us to keep our physical fitness up both before or after cases. Um, so that all being said, um, I try to exercise when I can currently, but as a new career person who just switched jobs, I think I can be better about it. It is very hard to make dedicated time for yourself to do something like that. I think especially in our fields, which tend to be busier. So um, TBD to once I am not 9 months pregnant and able to exercise again, and I'll get back to you on what I'm doing because it's still a work in progress, if you will.
Well, I think right now you have bigger fish to fry, obviously. But congrats again for hanging in there, and And that baby already has seen a lot of procedures, so it's destined for
Yeah,
for
my two and
greatness.
a half year old is running around saying that he wants to go to the doctor, and I can't tell if that's a good or a bad thing.
Well, it's good again. The more experiences, the better, I guess. But what are and obviously you have a new job, so that's an exciting part. What are your plans for the future? What are things that excite you for the specialty, but also personally? What would you like to do down the line?
Yeah, I mean, as an early career person who's only like a year and a half into being on my own, I think what I am most focused on is just not losing, making sure I keep up the skill sets that I received in training. I think it's, um, one of the things I like about CTO PCI in particular is that it's very much a problem solving specialty. Like, this didn't work, so now I'm going to do this. And so, right now, what I'm focusing on is trying to make sure that I keep practicing all those different techniques. Like, maybe I could do this case retrograde, but I could probably do Stingray here instead. I'll do Stingray because I don't do as much Stingray as I go retrograde, trying to just keep all of those things as up to date as possible in order to be able to tackle these hard cases in all of the available ways. Bill was really good about this in training. He would always say, like, you need to pick something or one or two things every year that you like focus on. He calls it his purposeful practice. And so I've been really trying to focus on that and making sure that I do these sorts of things to make sure that I both keep up the skill set, but also like figure out how I'm going to do them on my own when there's not somebody standing next to me. So that's really what I'm working on right now.
Wonderful.
um, yeah. And in the
And
future, go ahead.
no, no, I'm sorry. And then in the field, so that's personally, but like, what excites you in PCI and complex PCI right now?
I, I this is going to sound like everybody, I'm sure everyone has said this, but I am really excited for the like DCBs coming out, particularly in the use for star cases or spam cases. I think that that has the potential to be really cool and improve potentially the like patency rates of these more salvage investment procedures for really complex CTOs. Like, I can't wait to. I know the Europeans have been doing it for a while, and so they'll all probably say, "Yeah, that's old news." But I'm really excited to do like DCBs and stars and to see how that affects our healing and maybe our patency rates. Um, there, that's probably the thing that is most notable to me at the moment, if you will.
Perfect. And I think many people do share the same excitement for DCBs. I know in Europe they've used it sometimes for the investment procedures, as you mentioned, sometimes to minimize the stent length. But again, lots of learning coming ahead, and that's a great area to be involved in. Now, what is your favorite movie and your favorite book?
Oh, my favorite movie is there's probably I'm like a nerd. I really like kind of sci-fi sorts of things. So probably some combination of The Abyss, Jurassic Park, and there's this movie from I want to say it's the early 2000s. It's like a horror sci-fi called Event Horizon. I like those types of movies. In fact, I was like just sitting around the other day and I just put The Abyss on, and my husband was like, "Are you watching The Abyss?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's a great movie." And then books, I'm finishing, or well, when we talked last time, I was finishing a book called The Hail Mary Project, which is also sci-fi. That it was really good. Actually, the Boston rep, Jonathan Hicks at Montefiore, recommended it to me, and it took me a while to get through it, but it's really good if you like sort of sci-fi sort of stuff.
So you like to experience fear, I guess, so you get used to it in case
Yes.
things don't go well. Now I see the secret to
Yes.
success. But
Fear or just dumb things. Like, I watch a lot of mindless reality TV. It's it's not good, but when you want to turn your brain off at the end of a hard day, I do. That's my jam.
And everyone needs to unwind a little bit. So this is perfect. Now, how much do you sleep? And obviously, no pregnancy this changes, but how much sleep do you try to get?
So I feel like when I was younger, I was a night owl and I stayed up until midnight. I go to bed at like 9 p.m. And that was
Wise,
even
wise.
that was even pre-pregnancy. I go to bed very early, and part of it is because I think I am not a morning person, and I don't know what is wrong with me that I chose this field where I need to get up early every day. So I really value sleep. Sleep is very important to me, and so I go to bed pretty early unless I absolutely have to be up for something else.
Perfect. Well, again, I think we all undervalue sleep, and I think everyone is complaining they don't sleep enough. So it's actually refreshing to see someone who is making this statement into
Yeah,
practice because the
no,
benefits are many.
I go to sleep. Yeah, there's no way. I'm sort of functionless after 9:30 or 10, unless I'm on call, and I swear I am very competent when I'm on call. But no, I go to bed very early.
Wonderful. And what are you most proud of, all the things that you've done so far?
Um, I mean, outside of my family is obviously wonderful. Goes without saying. I think that particularly when you do CTO fellowships or CHIP fellowships, um, there are lots of really positive things about that training environment. Like you get to see a lot of really complex cases. You get to see how people who are masters in their field do things. But with that, I think there's a lot of pressure. Lindsay, Celia, and I talk about this a lot. To be that good, to do things the way the people who trained you, who are masters in their field, do it. And I know for me, starting my first job, I was extremely stressed about what kind of operator I was going to be able to be and really doing right by Kate and Bill and all the operators at the University of Washington and making them proud of me. And so probably the thing I am most proud of personally is doing cases on, I know this probably sounds silly, but doing cases on my own and being successful on my own and failing on my own, but being able to do all that without totally falling apart. Which is
And
probably not the right way to say it, but I, I do think when you train this way, there's just a lot of pressure to about what you are going to look like as an operator, and so I'm probably most proud of just doing things on my own.
perfect. And again, that's a huge step, and people undervalue. But I think probably the most stressful year for everyone's life is the first year after fellowship, where you're out on your own, and now all the spotlight is on you, and you have all the pressure and the expectations. So again, phenomenal work on this, and keeping the balance and doing great cases, and also staying productive in multiple other ways. So, Katie, if you had to give some advice to the new operators or fellows or people who are early in their career and they want to follow a similar pathway, what would that advice be?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you are in a position in your life where doing a dedicated CHIP fellowship makes sense for you, I mean, I just think it was an invaluable year in my life as an operator. There's just nothing like having that kind of volume in a dedicated short time period to expose you to techniques, complication management, and all that stuff. So I think if you're in interventional fellowship or you're in general cardiology fellowship, and that sort of training time makes sense for you, cannot recommend it enough. Was really an invaluable period of time, but not everybody is in that part of their life. Some people are 4 to 5 years into training. They have several kids, or excuse me, not training, into their careers. They have several kids. They're not going to move to one of the 6 or 7 CHIP fellowship program cities. So if that's the case, then that's fine too. Lots of people learn how to do this both on the job or through proctoring. But if you want to do it. I mean, we need more people who will offer patients options when they've otherwise been told that they don't have them, particularly in more rural areas where there's not a big tertiary referral center that can necessarily also offer you transplant if things don't go the way you'd hoped. So it's not to say, like we spoke about earlier, it's not to say that these things are easy. You have to have hospital support, both for the procedure itself and for complication management and tolerance. But, you can start with bring in a proctor or go somewhere to see cases. I mean, I know that Bill will have people come in all the time and just to either get privileges and scrub or to watch. I think all of that can be really, really helpful, particularly if you've never seen necessarily how these cases are planned first and foremost and then done. Because planning, as you know, is at least 50% of the case, right? Like knowing how to set things up so that you can hopefully be successful. It's really scary, and I don't mean to downplay that. But if you are interested, then reach out. It's pretty easy to find all of our phone numbers and emails. Like I said, you're welcome to give people mine. Though I'll be gone for a few months, but then I'll be back. So yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think I love your point that there are different pathways. Yes, you can do the fellowship, which is tremendous, but if you cannot for various reasons, there are other ways that you can learn. And actually, most people right now would say the majority have not gone to fellowships just because of the recent phenomenon and they didn't have the time or the resources.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I also love your part about afterwards to have a place that is friendly and willing to support you, because that's where the game is eventually won.
Yeah, and I think that it's hard to do these cases, period. They're stressful. It's even harder to do them in a place where you're constantly being criticized and every complication is put under a microscope. Unfortunately, that is the reality of how some places are. And so having an environment where you can be successful, both from a procedural standpoint and a hospital standpoint, is important for you. And I think very much for your mental health.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Could not agree more. So, Katie, thanks again. I know, actually, I'm sorry we did it twice, but actually, I'm glad because I learned more. So maybe with this third time, no, I'm just
yeah, exactly.
But thank you so much.
Of course, no problem.
Wonderful points. Congratulations on the work and the baby, most importantly, and thanks for everything.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Sensei podcast.